At 9:17 that morning, 152 airplanes stopped moving, and almost nobody knew it had begun with a man being ordered out of Seat 1A. Across Crestmont Air's network, gate doors remained open, jet bridges stayed locked in place, and departure screens shifted from green to yellow in airports from Atlanta to Seattle. Pilots waited for clearance that never came. Operations managers stared at messages marked governance hold, while finance executives watched access to $2.1 billion in credit guarantees, aircraft leases, and projected revenue freeze behind a wall of legal authorization. No storm had crossed the country. No computer system had failed. The disruption had started at Gate 31 in Atlanta, where Marcus Bennett sat alone beside a floor-to-ceiling window, his charcoal overcoat folded across his lap, and his leather briefcase resting between polished black shoes. Outside, a Crestmont jet waited beneath the pale morning sky, its engines silent, its nose pointed toward New York. Marcus watched a baggage cart roll beneath the wing with the calm attention of a man observing something he had already decided not to interrupt. 20 feet away, Michelle Harper stood behind the gate counter, speaking quickly into a phone. Her airline blazer was buttoned, her nameplate perfectly straight, but one hand kept tightening around the receiver. She still did not know who Marcus was. She only knew that he had made one call after she removed him from first class, and now the entire airline seemed to be holding its breath. 31 minutes earlier, Marcus had walked down the jet bridge without an assistant, security detail, or announcement. He carried his own bag. He paused to thank a cleaning employee who stepped aside for him, then entered the aircraft and turned left into the first-class cabin. His Navy suit was expensive but quiet, cut cleanly across his shoulders with no bright label or unnecessary shine. A silver watch rested beneath his cuff. At 49, Marcus had learned that people often mistook restraint for uncertainty. He placed his briefcase under the seat in front of him, settled into Seat 1A, and opened a sealed folder marked Crestmont Renewal, Final Authorization. Inside were the documents that could determine whether 30,000 airline employees kept their jobs through the end of the year. The final meeting was scheduled in Manhattan that afternoon. Marcus had spent 6 months arguing that Crestmont Air could still be saved, but before he signed anything, he wanted to see the company as ordinary passengers saw it. No executive welcome, no prepared staff, no polished tour, just a ticket, a gate, and a seat. He had read only 2 pages when a shadow fell across the folder. Marcus closed it before looking up. Michelle Harper stood in the aisle with one hand resting on the top of his seat. Her expression was controlled, almost courteous, but her eyes had already reached a conclusion the boarding system had not. "Sir," she said, glancing at the cabin behind him, "you cannot be here." Marcus held Michelle's gaze for a moment before looking down at the boarding pass on his phone. "My seat is 1A, he said. His voice was low enough that the passenger across the aisle had to lean slightly to hear it. Michelle extended her hand. "May I see your boarding pass?" Marcus unlocked the screen and handed her the phone. She studied the digital ticket, then glanced at him again. The name matched. The flight number matched. The cabin showed first class. The seat showed 1A. Nothing on the screen supported the certainty in her face, yet she did not step aside. "I will also need to see identification," she said. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and gave her his driver's license. Michelle compared the photograph, the name, and the date of birth. Behind her, passengers continued settling into their seats. Overhead bins clicked shut. A flight attendant welcomed a couple near the front door, but her eyes moved toward Michelle as the silence around Seat 1A began to stretch. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked. Michelle returned the license, but kept the phone. "There may be a seating error in the system." "What kind of error?" "Sometimes an upgrade is assigned incorrectly." Marcus looked at the boarding pass, still glowing in her hand. Was his seat assigned as an upgrade? Michelle did not answer. Instead, she turned toward the aisle as a white man in a gray business suit stepped into the cabin, carrying a garment bag. He stopped when he saw Marcus. "Excuse me," the man said, looking past him toward the window. "I believe that is supposed to be my seat." Michelle's posture changed immediately. "What is your name, sir?" "Richard Sloan. I am on the upgrade list." Marcus watched her tap through the airline application. Richard waited with the easy impatience of someone accustomed to being accommodated. I fly this route every week, he added. They usually clear me before boarding. Michelle nodded, as though his history explained the present. I understand, Mr. Sloan. We are sorting it out. Marcus looked from Richard to Michelle. Does his boarding pass say 1A? Richard gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. Not yet. Mine does. Michelle's expression tightened. Sir, I need you to cooperate while we verify the assignment. You verified the ticket and the identification. The system can still make mistakes. Marcus extended his hand for the phone. Michelle hesitated before returning it. Across the aisle, a woman lowered her magazine. Near the galley, the flight attendant stopped arranging bottled water. Marcus placed the phone on his knee. What exactly is invalid? He asked. Michelle glanced at Richard, then back at Marcus. I am not saying the ticket is invalid. Then what are you saying? Her professional smile returned, thinner than before. I am asking you to step into the jet bridge while we resolve this privately. Marcus looked at the empty aisle behind her, then at Richard standing beside the seat he had already decided belonged to him. And if I remain in the seat listed on my valid boarding pass? Michelle straightened her nameplate with one finger. Then you'll be refusing a direct instruction from airline staff. Marcus kept his hand resting on the phone in his lap. A direct instruction should have a reason, he said. Michelle's smile disappeared. The reason is that I am responsible for boarding this aircraft safely and on time. My ticket is valid. My identification matches. I am seated where the ticket places me. Richard Sloan shifted his garment bag from one hand to the other. Look, I do not want to make this complicated, he said, though he was the only person standing in the aisle without a confirmed seat. I have been on the upgrade list since yesterday. Maybe someone at the gate cleared the wrong passenger. Marcus turned toward him. Were you assigned seat 1A? Richard looked at Michelle instead of answering. I was told there was a strong chance. Michelle raised one palm. Mr. Sloan, we will take care of this. The certainty in her voice settled over the cabin before the facts did. Marcus saw the flight attendant near the galley glance toward the boarding door, then toward the passengers watching from the second row. The cabin had grown quiet enough for the air vent above his head to sound unusually loud. Please step outside, Michelle said. You can return once we confirm everything. Will you hold the seat while you confirm it? Marcus asked. She paused. We will follow standard procedure. That was not my question. Richard exhaled and checked his watch. Some of us have meetings in New York. Marcus looked down at the sealed folder beneath his hand. The meeting Richard could not see would decide whether Crestmont Air had enough financial support to keep thousands of employees working through the year. Marcus closed the folder completely and slid it into his briefcase. So do I, he said. Michelle reached for the call button near the galley. I need assistance in the first-class cabin. The flight attendant approached, but before she could speak, a young gate employee appeared at the aircraft door. His nameplate read Ethan Cole. Michelle, I checked the passenger record, Ethan said. Seat 1A is confirmed under Marcus Bennett. It was purchased directly, not upgraded. The payment cleared 3 weeks ago. For the first time, Michelle's eyes moved away from Marcus. Did you check for duplicate assignment? Yes. There is none. Security notation? None. Ethan glanced at Marcus, then lowered his voice. The reservation is clean. Michelle looked toward the passengers who had heard every word. A reasonable decision was still available to her. Marcus waited for it. Instead, she turned back to Ethan. The passenger is refusing to follow a crew instruction. Ethan blinked. But the seat is his. That is no longer the issue. Michelle pressed the call button again. Document the delay as non-compliance. Marcus felt every phone in the cabin rise a little higher. He understood the choice being placed in front of him. If he argued, the recording would begin with his resistance. If he remained silent, Michelle would write the official account herself. He stood slowly, buttoned his overcoat, and lifted his briefcase without touching anyone around him. I will step outside, he said. Michelle moved aside with visible relief. Marcus stopped beside Ethan at the aircraft door. Did the system reject my ticket? Ethan looked at Michelle, then answered clearly. No, sir. Marcus nodded once. Then preserve that record. Behind him, Richard was already lowering himself into seat 1A. Renee entered the final authorization code, and the effect began far beyond Gate 31. At Crestmont Air Operations centers across the country, departure lines changed color one by one. 12 flights moved to hold status, then 28, then 47. In Dallas, a captain waiting for pushback received an instruction to keep the aircraft at the gate. In Chicago, a jet bridge that had already started to retract locked back into position. In Phoenix, a dispatcher watched 3 connecting flights turn yellow on the same screen. None of them knew the reason. They only saw the same message: governance review in progress. At Gate 31, Michelle pressed the departure release button and frowned when nothing happened. She pressed it again. Ethan looked over from the second terminal. The system is not accepting the close command. Refresh it, she said. I already did. Michelle took the tablet from him and entered her employee credentials. The screen returned a new notice requiring executive operations clearance. This is probably a network delay, she said. Call dispatch. Ethan picked up the phone, but dispatch called first. Michelle answered with practiced impatience. Gauta Titien. The voice on the other end spoke quickly enough to erase her expression. No, the aircraft is fully boarded, she said. There is no mechanical issue. She listened again. What do you mean? All Crestmont departures. Marcus remained beside the window, one hand resting on the handle of his briefcase. He could see the first signs spreading across the ramp. A tug that had approached Flight 417 stopped short of the nose gear. Ground employees looked toward the terminal for instructions. Inside the cabin, passengers began checking their phones as the scheduled departure time passed. Renee stayed on the line. The hold has reached 103 flights, she said. Finance has acknowledged the preservation order. Passenger impact? Marcus asked. Increasing. Create exceptions now. Medical transfers, unaccompanied children, emergency personnel, and international connections with no practical alternative. That will slow the verification. Then verification slows. Marcus watched a family near the gate counter receive a cancellation alert and immediately corrected himself. Do not cancel any flight. Hold at the gate until the exception review is complete. Rebooking assistance begins now, not after legal finishes. Renee did not question him. Understood. Michelle ended her call and turned toward Ethan. Operations says a legal authorization has frozen departures. Ethan looked at Marcus, then at the code on the passenger record. It started after his call. Michelle followed his eyes. Do not speculate. The code beside his name is restricted at the executive level. Corporate passengers do not control aircraft movement. Ethan lowered his voice. Maybe he is not just a corporate passenger. Michelle stared at Marcus across the concourse. For the first time, uncertainty entered her face, but she pushed it away almost immediately. People make calls when they want attention, she said. This will be resolved. Marcus's phone vibrated. Renee spoke with the same calm precision she used in boardrooms. 152 flights are now held. Credit guarantees, aircraft lease approvals, and projected revenue tied to the renewal have been placed behind legal authorization. Total exposure is $2.1 billion. Marcus looked at the passengers gathering beneath the yellow departure screens. Release the priority exceptions as soon as the records are secured. Already moving. At the gate counter, Michelle received another call. This time she answered without introducing herself. She listened, and all color left her face. A senior voice from Crestmont headquarters asked only one question. Where is Marcus Bennett? Michelle held the phone against her ear without answering. Across the concourse, Marcus stood exactly where she had left him, beside the window overlooking the runway, calm enough to make the growing confusion around him seem louder. He is still at the gate, she finally said. The voice from headquarters sharpened. Do not let him leave. Thomas Whitaker is on his way. The call ended before she could ask why. Michelle lowered the receiver and looked at Ethan. Open the passenger record. Ethan turned the tablet toward himself. It is locked. Use my authorization. Your authorization was suspended from the file. Michelle reached for the keyboard and entered her credentials anyway. The system displayed a notice stating that all edits related to Marcus Bennett, Flight 417, and Gate 31 had been preserved under legal review. Beneath the warning was a line she had not seen before. Evidence chain active. Her breathing changed, almost too slightly for anyone else to notice. "Who locked it?" she asked. Ethan did not answer. He was staring at the restricted code beside Marcus's name. A new access window had opened after the governance hold, revealing the full designation behind AMH-01. Ethan read it once, then again. "Michelle," he said quietly, "Apex Meridian Holdings." She looked at him. "What about it?" Ethan opened Crestmont Air's annual report through the internal employee portal. The first pages showed aircraft numbers, route growth, and executive photographs. He scrolled to the corporate governance section and stopped. A photograph filled the tablet. Marcus Bennett stood at the center of a long boardroom table, wearing the same controlled expression he wore beside the airport window. The caption identified him as founder and chief executive officer of Apex Meridian Holdings, controlling shareholder of Crestmont Air, and chairman of the Renewal Authorization Committee. Michelle stared at the screen. That photograph could be old. Ethan looked toward Marcus. "It is him. There are people who resemble each other. His name is on the ticket." Michelle glanced at the passengers gathered near the counter. Several had heard enough to begin watching her instead of the departure screen. She lowered her voice. "Do not discuss internal records in public." Ethan kept the tablet in front of her. "You canceled the travel record of the person who controls the renewal agreement. I followed procedure. The procedure showed his seat was valid." Michelle turned away and reopened the incident report, but every field was red only. Her earlier entry remained visible, including the claim that Marcus had delayed boarding through noncompliance. Below it, the system showed timestamps proving she entered that claim after Ethan confirmed there was no ticket problem. Michelle selected the edit icon. Nothing happened. She tried again. Ethan stepped closer. "You cannot change it now. I am correcting incomplete information. You're changing the record after legal locked it." Marcus heard the exchange, but did not turn around. Renee remained on the phone, updating him as priority flights began clearing one at a time. A medical transfer in Denver was released. 2 unaccompanied children in Orlando were rebooked without charge. Emergency personnel traveling through Dallas received immediate approval. The hold remained, but it was controlled, measured, and documented. Michelle watched the yellow screens and seemed to understand that the disruption was not a technical failure. It was an answer. The crowd near Gate 31 parted as 3 people approached from the main concourse. Thomas Whitaker led them, his dark suit moving faster than his expression. Crestmont senior legal counsel walked beside him, followed by an operations director carrying a secured tablet. Thomas did not look at Michelle when he reached the counter. He did not ask for the report or the flight status. He walked directly to Marcus, stopped a few feet away, and said in a voice everyone at the gate could hear, "Mr. Bennett, on behalf of Crestmont Air, I owe you an apology." Marcus turned from a window and faced Thomas Whitaker without changing his expression. "An apology should follow the facts," he said. Thomas nodded once, then looked toward the gate counter. "Bring the original passenger record, the seat history, the security notes, and every version of the incident report." Crestmont's legal counsel opened the secured tablet. Ethan moved beside her and transferred the copy he had saved before the file was locked. Michelle stood several feet away, her hands resting flat against the counter. "I can explain what happened," she said. Thomas did not look at her. "You will have that opportunity after the record is established." The legal counsel read the first entry aloud. Marcus Bennett had purchased Seat 1A 3 weeks earlier. Payment had cleared. The ticket had been scanned successfully at the gate. No duplicate assignment existed. No security notation had been attached to the reservation. Ethan confirmed that he had checked each item before Michelle removed Marcus from the aircraft. One of the airport security officers stepped forward when asked whether Marcus had threatened anyone, raised his voice, blocked the aisle, or resisted instructions. "No," the officer said. He remained calm the entire time. Thomas turned to the operations director. "What caused the delay before Mr. Bennett left the aircraft?" The director checked the timestamps. Boarding was still active. The aircraft was not ready for departure. Michelle's earlier report remained visible beside the verified data. It described Marcus as disruptive, uncooperative, and responsible for delaying the flight. Each claim now sat beneath a timestamp that contradicted it. Michelle tried to speak again. He challenged my authority in front of passengers. Marcus looked at her. I asked what was invalid. You refused to leave your seat until you provided a reason. I was following procedure. Marcus's voice stayed measured. A procedure that changes only after it sees the passenger is not a procedure. It is permission. The words settled over gate 31. No one moved. Thomas finally faced Michelle. Why was Richard Sloan placed in seat 1A? She looked toward the open aircraft door. He was on the upgrade list. Was he confirmed for that seat? Not at the time. Then why did you remove a confirmed passenger for an unconfirmed passenger? Michelle's mouth opened, but no answer came. Ethan lowered his eyes to the tablet. Thomas continued. Why was the entire itinerary canceled after your employee verified there was no reservation error? Mr. Bennett continued to dispute the instruction. Why did you attempt to edit the report after legal preservation began? Michelle looked at Ethan as though the question itself were an accusation he had created. The report was incomplete. The system shows you tried to alter it after learning his corporate designation. The passengers nearest the counter had stopped speaking. Even Richard Sloan had stepped back out of the aircraft and now stood near the jet bridge entrance, no longer looking comfortable in the seat he had accepted. Thomas turned toward Marcus. Mr. Bennett, Crestmont Air recognizes Apex Meridian Holdings as its controlling shareholder. You also chair the committee responsible for the company's renewal financing. What happened here is unacceptable. Michelle's face lost the last of its confidence. She had finally understood that the man she had dismissed was not asking the airline to believe him. The airline's own records already did. Marcus opened his briefcase and removed the sealed folder marked Crestmont Renewal, Final Authorization. Thomas looked at the label, and his expression changed. Marcus placed the folder on the counter between them. You believe this is about a seat, he said. It is not. Marcus rested one hand on the sealed folder while Thomas waited. The yellow departure screens reflected across the counter, turning every face at gate 31 pale and uncertain. For 6 months, Marcus said, Crestmont Air has asked Apex Meridian Holdings to guarantee the financing that keeps your aircraft leases active, your fuel contract stable, and your payroll protected. Thomas glanced at the folder. He knew every page inside it. The committee meeting was scheduled for this morning, he said. It still is. Marcus opened the cover and revealed the unsigned authorization sheet. I came to Atlanta without an executive escort because financial reports do not tell me how a company behaves when it thinks nobody important is watching. Michelle looked down. The passengers nearest the counter remained silent. Marcus continued. Your board assured us that the complaints about passenger treatment were isolated. Your legal department described them as training gaps. Your operations team said local managers were following consistent standards. He turned slightly toward Ethan. This employee followed the standard. He checked the reservation, confirmed the seat, and reported the facts. Then he looked at Michelle. His manager ignored him because the facts did not support the decision she had already made. Thomas's jaw tightened. This incident will be investigated. This incident is already documented, Marcus said. The question is whether it is unusual. Crestmont's legal counsel looked up from the secured tablet. We have received notice that the preservation order now covers 3 years of passenger complaints, seat removals, conduct reports, and manager-level overrides. Thomas stared at her. 3 years. Marcus nodded. The hold protects more than one gate record. Michelle stepped forward. You cannot judge an entire airline based on one misunderstanding. Marcus met her eyes. A misunderstanding ends when the evidence appears. You saw the evidence and changed the accusation. She opened her mouth, but Thomas raised one hand. Enough. Renee's voice came through Marcus's phone, which remained connected on the counter. The authorization committee is assembled. They are requesting Mr. Bennett's recommendation. Thomas looked toward the departure boards. How long can the network remain under hold? Long enough to secure the records. Marcus said, but not 1 minute longer than necessary. Renee confirmed that priority exceptions were already moving. Medical travel had been cleared first. Families with unaccompanied children were being assisted. International passengers facing missed connections were receiving hotel and rebooking protection. No flight had been canceled by Marcus's order. The disruption was controlled, but the financial exposure remained locked. Thomas lowered his voice. $2.1 billion is tied to that agreement. Yes. Without renewal, we will have to reduce routes. Yes. Thousands of jobs could be affected. Marcus looked through the glass at the ground crews waiting beside Flight 417. That is why I argued to save this company when other board members wanted to walk away. Thomas's expression shifted from fear to confusion. Then why freeze it? Because saving a company without correcting what it permits only finances the next failure. Marcus removed the signature page and placed it flat on the counter. The line beneath his name remained empty. Today was supposed to confirm that Crestmont deserved another chance. He looked at Ethan, then at Michelle, then back to Thomas. Instead, it confirmed that the current agreement is not enough. Renee spoke through the phone. Marcus, the committee needs a decision. Thomas held his breath. Michelle stared at the blank signature line. Marcus picked up a pen, but he did not sign. Tell them I will approve the renewal, he said. Thomas exhaled, but Marcus raised his eyes before relief could reach him. Not this version. Thomas looked at the unsigned page, then at Marcus. What changes are you requiring? Marcus placed the pen beside the folder. Independent Review Authority outside Crestmont Management. Full access to 3 years of passenger complaints. Mandatory preservation of gate video and reservation history whenever a passenger is removed after presenting a valid ticket. No single manager may alter a conduct report after another employee has disputed it. Employees who report procedural abuse will be protected from retaliation. Ethan lifted his eyes. Michelle remained still. Marcus continued. A passenger rights panel will review removal decisions involving verified reservations. Training records will be audited, not self-reported. Findings will be published to the board every quarter. Compensation for passengers affected by today's hold will be automatic, not dependent on a complaint form. Thomas listened without interrupting. In the existing leadership structure, he asked. The renewal committee will appoint an outside compliance officer with authority to suspend local procedures that fail review. Executive bonuses tied to on-time performance will be adjusted so employees are not rewarded for forcing questionable departures through the system. The operations director exchanged a glance with legal counsel. Marcus noticed it. A company cannot claim safety and fairness while paying people to ignore both whenever the clock turns red. Renee's voice came through the phone. I can circulate revised terms within 10 minutes. Do it, Marcus said. Thomas looked toward the passengers waiting beneath the yellow screens. When will the flights be released? As soon as each station confirms preservation and priority screening. Not after the agreement is signed. Passengers are not leverage. Marcus's answer came without hesitation. The financial hold remains. The aircraft do not stay trapped because leadership failed. Renee confirmed that 63 flights had already completed evidence checks. 12 medical and humanitarian exceptions were moving. The remaining departures would clear in controlled waves. Thomas exhaled slowly. Then Crestmont accepts the conditions. Marcus looked at him. You cannot accept for the board. I can recommend immediate approval. Recommendation is not accountability. Thomas nodded, understanding the distinction. He contacted the board secretary and requested an emergency vote. While he spoke, Crestmont's legal counsel turned to Michelle. Your system access is suspended pending investigation. You are not to contact witnesses, modify records, or discuss protected evidence with staff. Michelle's face tightened. Am I being fired because I did not recognize him? Marcus answered before anyone else could. No. She looked at him. Then why? Because you had the correct ticket, the correct identification, the correct seat record, and an employee telling you the truth. You rejected all of it. Then you changed the report when the facts did not support your decision. Michelle looked toward Ethan. He undermined me in front of passengers. He preserved the truth in front of pressure, Marcus said. That is what the company should have rewarded from the beginning. Thomas ended his call. The board has approved the revised framework in principle. Formal signatures are being prepared. Renee confirmed the vote through the secured line. Marcus picked up the pen again, but before signing, he addressed the conditions of the immediate investigation. Michelle would be placed on administrative suspension. Ethan would receive written protection as a witness. The security officers, flight crew, and passengers who had recorded the exchange would be invited to submit evidence. No one would be punished for cooperating. The $2.1 billion would remain frozen until the revised agreement was executed and the first compliance appointments were confirmed. On the departure screens, the first line changed from yellow back to green. Then another followed. Across the country, jet bridges began to retract and aircraft started moving again. Thomas watched the network return in measured steps. "You are still willing to save the airline," he said. Marcus looked through the glass at the employees waiting beneath the wing of Flight 417. "I am willing to save the people who should not have to lose their livelihoods because leadership refused to correct itself." He signed the temporary authorization beneath the new conditions, then closed the folder. "The company gets another chance," he said. "The old permission does not." The first departures cleared in controlled waves, but Gate 31 remained still. Flight 417 could not move until the legal team completed its review of the cabin records, the seat reassignment, and Michelle's report. Passengers watched the departure screen shift from yellow to a message promising an update within 15 minutes. No one cheered. The scale of what had happened had quieted the gate more effectively than any announcement. Thomas Whitaker stood beside the counter while Crestmont's legal counsel collected statements from Ethan, the security officers, and the flight attendant who had witnessed the exchange inside the cabin. Richard Sloan approached with Marcus's original seat assignment displayed on his phone. His confidence had disappeared. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I should not have taken that seat." Marcus looked at him. "You accepted what the manager offered." Richard lowered his eyes. "I also assumed she had a reason. Most unfair systems survive because everyone assumes someone else has a reason." Richard nodded and returned to the waiting area without asking to keep the upgrade. Near the jet bridge, Michelle handed her badge and company tablet to the operations director. Her administrative suspension began immediately. She was instructed to leave the work area but remain available for the independent investigation. Before stepping away, she looked at Marcus. "I made one bad decision," she said. "You made several," Marcus replied. "The first could have been corrected. The others were made to protect it." Michelle looked toward Ethan, then at the passengers whose phones had recorded the encounter. "What happens to me now?" "The evidence decides that," Marcus said. "Not my anger." She left under the supervision of a human resources representative, without spectacle and without anyone following her. Thomas watched her disappear into the concourse. "You could have demanded her termination on the spot." Marcus closed his briefcase. "Then the lesson would be that mistreating an important person is dangerous. That is not the lesson this company needs." Ethan stood nearby, uncertain whether he was permitted to speak. Marcus turned toward him. "You saved the original record." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Ethan glanced at the secured tablet in legal counsel's hands. "Because it was true. You knew your manager would be angry." "Yes." "You did it anyway." Ethan nodded. Marcus extended his hand. "That matters more than recognizing my name." Thomas informed Ethan that retaliation protections had already been entered into his personnel file and that he would be invited to assist the independent compliance team. Ethan looked stunned. "I'm only a gate employee." Marcus released his hand. That is where the truth was needed. A chime sounded above the counter. Flight 417 had completed evidence preservation and was cleared for departure. The gate agent who replaced Michelle announced that every affected passenger would receive automatic compensation, including meals, ground transportation when needed, and rebooking protection. Marcus had insisted that no one be required to prove inconvenience the airline had created itself. Thomas checked the updated network report. All 152 flights were either moving or scheduled for release. The financial hold remained in place only until the revised agreement and oversight appointments were formally executed. Seat 1A has been restored to your reservation, Thomas said. The crew is ready to welcome you back. Marcus looked through the open jet bridge toward the aircraft. The Manhattan meeting had already moved to secure video. Returning to the seat would prove nothing. Give it to the next confirmed passenger, he said. Thomas hesitated. You are not taking the flight? Marcus looked at the green departure screen. The seat was never the point. Marcus entered a small conference room overlooking the runway, while Flight 417 prepared to leave without him. The room contained a long table, a wall screen, and a pitcher of water no one had touched. Renee appeared on the secure video beside the members of the renewal committee in Manhattan. Thomas joined from the opposite end of the table, carrying the revised agreement that Crestmont's board had approved. Marcus read every condition before placing his signature on the final page. The $2.1 billion would be released in stages, each tied to measurable reforms, independent audits, and public reporting. No executive would receive credit for promises. The company would earn each portion through results. Outside the window, Flight 417 pushed away from Gate 31. Marcus watched it turn toward the taxiway, then returned his attention to the screen. The renewal is approved, he said. The oversight is not optional. One committee member asked whether the disruption had been worth the financial risk. Marcus looked at the line of aircraft beginning to move across the airport again. The risk already existed, he said. Today made it visible. In the weeks that followed, investigators reviewed thousands of passenger complaints and discovered that Gate 31 had not been an isolated failure. Some cases involved legitimate safety concerns, but others followed the same pattern Marcus had experienced. A valid passenger questioned repeatedly, a manager overriding evidence, and an official report written to justify a decision after it had already been made. The findings were delivered to the board without alteration. Michelle Harper's employment was terminated after the investigation confirmed that she had reassigned a valid seat, misrepresented Marcus's conduct, ignored verified information, and attempted to change the record after learning his identity. The decision did not mention that Marcus was wealthy or powerful. It did not need to. Ethan Cole accepted a temporary position with the independent compliance team. 6 months later, he became its youngest permanent member. His first assignment was helping design a system that preserved ticket records automatically whenever an employee disputed a manager's removal decision. At the new training center, one sentence appeared beneath the Crestmont logo. Every valid passenger belongs before their importance is known. Marcus returned months later without advance notice. No executive met him at the entrance. No employee recognized him when he joined an ordinary boarding line with his briefcase beside him. That was exactly how he wanted it. A gate agent checked his identification once, confirmed his seat, and thanked him for flying Crestmont. Nearby, Ethan observed the process without intervening. When their eyes met, Marcus gave him a small nod. The system had not become perfect, but it had learned to correct itself before power entered the room. Marcus boarded, placed his briefcase beneath the seat, and looked through the window as the jet bridge pulled away. He had never frozen an airline because he lost a seat. He had frozen it because a company had forgotten that dignity was not a privilege to be granted after someone's name became important. It was the first obligation owed to everyone who entered the door.